You ever ask the question why when you're faced with misfortune, trial, tragedy, distress, pain? I'm sure you probably have. It's one of the most universally recognized questions to ask. It is a reaction to tragedy and pain and suffering, especially if the perception is there that I didn't do anything to deserve this. But is it the best question to ask when you're faced with misfortune, suffering, pain? I would argue that perhaps there is a better question for us to ask, such as, what now? What am I supposed to gain from this experience? Because it is unavoidable. Pain is one of the things that every human being has in common. We all hurt. We all experience hardship and misfortune. And we often live under the assumption that if we got an answer to the question why, that it would be satisfactory, that it would be pleasing, that it would make sense for us. We believe that the answer would be a good one. I've never received an answer to that question. I don't know that anybody ever has. Now, certainly there are people that'll come along and they'll offer their justifications and finger pointing, and this is happening because of this reason, and this person's responsible, and you must have done something wrong. It reminds me of a character in the Bible named Job. I actually wrote my dissertation on Job chapter 28. It's one of the most contested chapters in the entire book for a variety of reasons, mostly because there's a change in tone and content from the preceding context, and it just doesn't seem to fit. Other arguments for that are the development of the book over a period of time and the changes in language. Contrary to a lot of beliefs, Job is not the oldest book of the Bible. Most recent Jobian scholarship dates it between the 5th and 3rd century BCE. And what you find with Job is that he engages with the text of Deuteronomy on multiple occasions. Job is kind of like a sarcastic commentary on the theology of Deuteronomy. In Deuteronomy 28, we're told that those who are obedient and faithful will have these blessings that will just chase them down and overtake them. Well, you're introduced to such a person in Job chapter 1, verse 1, where Elohim presents Job as a man who was blameless, who walked uprightly, who reverenced God and turned away from evil. And then shortly thereafter, the divine assembly, the divine council meets. Now, for those unfamiliar with the term, the divine assembly, the divine council, it was common in ancient Near Eastern literature, particularly ancient Near Eastern conflict myths. And the purpose there was the legitimizing of kingship and wisdom and sovereignty, or the delegitimizing of kingship, wisdom, sovereignty. And in the divine assembly, you had a variety of characters. You had a superior deity, you had subordinates, the sons of God, and you had a challenger, which for us in the text of Job is Hasatan. Hasatan presents a challenge to the superior, Elohim, that Job is not serving you for nothing. And if you were to just lift your hand off of his life, he would curse you to your face. Shortly thereafter, Job loses his health, his prosperity, his children, and his wife confronts him and says, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Just curse God and die." And Job says, "Should we receive good at the hand of the Lord and not evil? I came into the world naked, and I'm going to leave the world naked. Blessed be the name of God. He gives and he takes away." Well, that attitude didn't last very long, because by the time you get to the 3rd chapter, Job is asking the very same question that each of us ask. A man that did nothing at all to deserve this, but he suffered incredible misfortune and tragedy. Job begins to ask questions such as, why was I not born dead? Why was I not buried like a stillborn child? Why were there knees to receive me or breasts for me to suck on? Why did God give light to a man whose way is hidden and whom God has fenced in with all of this pain? And then from chapters 4 to 27, Job is engaged in this debate and dialogue with his friends where he's having to defend his character. He wants his day in court with God. He wants an audience with God. He's defending his character. His friends are offering justifications for all of his suffering, saying, "Job, you must have done something wrong. You must have deserved this. You must have sinned against God in some capacity. And if you would just return to the fear of God, your life would be fine." At some point in chapter 13, Job just looks at his friends and says, "I just wish you'd shut up. Let your silence be your wisdom." They're all engaged in this quest for wisdom. that would make sense out of senseless suffering and hardship and pain. And then you come to chapter number 28. Now, many have a tacit acknowledgement. If you read any of your English translations of the Bible, there is no break between chapter 27 and chapter 29. It appears as though the translators have just offered a tacit acknowledgement that Job is continuing his discourse from the 27th chapter, but the grammar in 27:1 and the grammar in 29:1 suggests that chapter 28 is more of an interruption. It is an interruption in the flow of all of the arguments that have taken place before, and it is a wisdom poem. And poetry allows us to be verbally inventive in ways that a literal reading of the text would not permit. And the wisdom that they were searching for is depicted in the activity of the miners who know that there's a place for gold and silver and copper and ore and iron, and they're probing the earth and they're unveiling all of these treasures from creation, and they go to this remote uninhabited place where no human being dwells, and they expect this torrent, this raging riverbed, but it's dry and barren, and they have an experience similar to all of the tension in the preceding context. And the poet in chapter 28 leads us to see that the principal motif in Job 28 is on the search for wisdom, because the miners are unable to locate in creation the thing that they're looking for the most. And so the poet says, but where shall wisdom be found? Where is the place of understanding? It is beyond the grasp of mortals. It's hidden from the eyes of every living creature. It's not available to us here. It won't make sense to us here. We can't lay hold of it. It's beyond human capacity. But then the poet transitions to this in the last strophe of chapter 28, but God knows the way to it. He possessed it when he gave the wind its weight and a place for the thunderbolt and established the boundaries of the water. When he said to mankind, the wisdom that they're looking for is divinely revealed. It is revealed. When he said to mankind, truly the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding. And when you read that verse, you're drawn back to this character, Job, in chapter 1, verse 1, who did that. He was the human embodiment of the definition of wisdom and understanding. And what you find is Job 28 is this metaphorical embellishment on the struggle and the search for the answer for why, the wisdom to understand why. And they realize that answer is not available to them here. They have to look elsewhere. And so the poet prepares us not only to hear Yahweh's voice, but to recognize his legitimate kingship and wisdom over all of creation. The poem is embedded in the preceding context, in the struggle, in the tension, in the search for wisdom, while preparing us to encounter and hear Yahweh's voice from the whirlwind. And Yahweh replies to Job finally after an extended period of silence, and he asks Job a series of rhetorical questions, of which when Job heard those questions, he replies with simply, I know that you can do all things, and no purpose of yours shall be thwarted. I heard about you from the hearing of the ears, but now my eyes see you. And Job repents. Job legitimized the kingship of Yahweh and his wisdom over all of creation, and he acted. We often live under this impression that life would be so much better if we just didn't have any pain. If God is good and he's all wise and he's all loving, then why did he create a world with pain in it? I'm reminded of a rare genetic condition that I learned about called congenital anhidrosis. Sometimes it's referred to as congenital insensitivity to pain anhidrosis. And this is a condition that renders a person incapable of feeling pain. They might bite their tongue off. They could bite their lip. They bite their finger off. It could result in an amputation. They don't know when they've been burned or when they've broken an arm because they cannot feel what pain is designed to teach them about what they're currently experiencing in life. When I worked in hospice, I had a close friend who was the social worker. I was the chaplain. He was the social worker. He was a Buddhist. And he looked at me one day and he says, Mike, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. And he goes on to explain to me that we suffer because we crave for things to be other than the way they are. Or when we are confronted with an unpleasant experience, we tend to push it away. We show aversion to it. Craving and aversion are the cause of our suffering. We're going to hurt. We're going to have pain in life, but our relationship to that pain can be markedly different depending on our desires. I hope this has caused you to reflect a little deeper on the experience of pain and suffering in your life, and to maybe consider asking a different question that might be more helpful. Maybe pause for a minute and ask yourself, when I ask why, when I'm confronted by pain and suffering and hardship and tragedy and misfortune, when I ask why, is it helpful? Has it helped me to bear up under that experience with more courage? Have I ever gotten an answer that made sense and that was actually healing and helpful? Or can we accept this is our experience right now? What now? Thanks so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. If you like the content, you were inspired, you were informed, it helped you in any capacity, please leave a like, hit subscribe, leave me a comment. I would love to hear your thoughts on this very subject and learn from you as well. Thank you again.